Hi, I'm Dustin Kuhn. I'm an engineer at Fire Station 35. In this video, we're going to talk about the differences you'll see on our Type 3 apparatus. And by no means is this a complete pre-trip instruction. First, we're going to cover our daily engine compartment checks, including radiator fluid, air filter, window washer fluid, our serpentine belt tightness, oil, transmission fluid, and power steering fluid. Okay, first part of our daily check in the engine compartment is checking the radiator fluid. You want to check the cap for tightness, and you want to look at the fluid and make sure it's swinging full and low. Next, you're going to check the air filter for the engine. Look from the top side of it, look for debris and cleanliness of the air filter. Next, you're going to look at the window washer fluid, make sure the cap is tight and that your fluid's full. This is also a good side of the engine to test the tightness of the serpentine belt. Make sure that's 1/2 to 3/4 inch play at the center of the belt. Okay, we're going to talk about the air filter and just how to clean it. There's 3 screws holding it down. It's just a Phillips or a standard screwdriver. Well, once you get all 3 done, you're going to lift it out, inspect it, and then you're going to blow from this side outwards, from the inside to the outside, blow it with the compressor. You're also going to look down inside. There's a metal screen in there, and just look for any small debris or anything that might have gotten in there. And that's about it. Once that's clean, you put it back in and screw it back down, and you should be good to go. Okay, on the engineer side of the apparatus, we'll check the oil level, we'll check the transmission level, and we'll also check the power steering fluid level. This is also a great time to look at your suspension and start those checks also. So we're looking at the front captain side, front axle of our whole braking and steering system here. All these brush rigs now are drum brakes, which we're not used to seeing. All of our apparatus normally are disc brake. There's a little slot right here. This is a really good area to look through to look at your brake thickness. Drum brakes also need to be 1/4 inch thick or more. This has slack adjusters that need to be measured. To measure it, I'm going to place my ruler up against something firm. I'm going to notice this clevis pin right here. We're right at 5 on mine. And I'm going to go ahead and have a partner apply the brake. Okay, so I went to just about 1.5 inches of distance. So that's your measurement. Now there's a couple other things we want to look at under here. We want to look at for loose bolts, any cracks in the leaf springs or anything else, just overall appearance. Make sure there's no rocks or anything stuck in here and everything looks good. Now that I'm done checking the fluids inside the engine compartment, I'm going to move on to checking my wheels. As I walk up to my wheel, I'm looking at the overall condition. I'm checking the inflation, the condition, and the depth of the wheel. I'm looking at the sidewalls for any sort of gouges or cuts, and I'm checking the other side too for the same. There could have been off-roading the day before, or perhaps on a fire and gotten cut on a sidewall. Also, I'm going to check the rear duals for any sort of rocks or debris stuck in between. Okay, let's talk about the pump panel. On the top corner, we have the Foam Pro 1600. The green button is the on and off switch. And the selector dial goes from 0.1% to 1%. This will light up if the system's on. Our Foam Pro system only uses Class A foams. We cannot mix the foam. When they mix, they'll coagulate and cause a lot of problems with your foam system. Moving on, this is the auxiliary pump control panel. To turn the auxiliary pump on, you hit the on and off switch and you press this button in, that's the starter. As soon as it starts up, you'll generally get between 10 to 50 PSI. If you're at 10, you need to prime it. You hold that in, it'll jump up. To increase the pressure, you go to the bunny rabbit. To decrease, you go to the turtle. It has the same control as inside the cab, so you can do it from out here or in the cab. This is the throttle for the main pump. It likes to be throttled up slowly and throttled down slowly. We don't recommend that you just press the red button to stop it. Here's your tank fill and your tank to pump. This has an electric primer. We don't want to run that for more than 90 seconds max. As you move down, this switch right here is from pressure to volume. It's always on pressure for the most part. You switch over the volume at 2/3 your pump capacity, which is right around 300 GPM. We would use that if we're flowing a large amount of water and don't necessarily need the pressure. To switch from that, we'd like the pump to be in idle and not under pressure. Here we have our pump drain, we have our water level and our foam level. This is our intake that we'll use as a tank fill. And these controls up here are your engine RPM, voltage, oil pressure, and engine temp. And these are your intake and discharge pressure gauges. On this, the last one is our pressure relief valve. It can be selected on or off, and there is a drain right here. After you've maybe drafted water or been in a rural area and gotten a few tanks of water, you're going to get a lot of little debris that might cause your relief valve to act weird or not operate. To fix that, you open the strainer. There's a silver sleeve here, unscrew it some, then you unscrew this. This will come out, and there's a screen right here. There'll be a lot of debris on this screen. You let that flow out, clean the debris off, and hopefully that fixes your problem. Okay, we're on the passenger side of the apparatus. You open up this door, right down here, you'll see a little silver toggle switch. If you flick that off, wait 10 seconds and turn it back on, that'll reset your foam unit. And hopefully that fixes your problem. Okay, I'd like to talk about a few items while driving the apparatus. We have an exhaust pipe that hangs down pretty low. It's on the first series of these brush rigs. Has a pretty low ground clearance, so it's something you need to be aware of while driving. Also, the running boards hang down pretty low on this. Below the running boards are some lights that hang down, and those get ripped off quite often. So it's just something you need to be aware of while driving off the road. Here, we have our air outlet for blowing out the inside of the compartment to keep that clean. And right here, we have our two negative and positive grounds for jump starting the rig if it ever dies on a fire incident. Something about this rig too is it's very tall. It's 10 feet 4 inches. So when you're driving around neighborhoods or dozer trails or just out and about, be aware of tree limbs or low-hanging objects. Okay, on this series brush rig, we also have a circuit breaker located just underneath the cab. If you're having any electrical problems, this is out. You just push it back in and that'll reset. And a lot of times that fixes your problem. The newer series brush rigs have a waterproof cover over that. Also, right under here above it is our batteries. And to check those, this panel right here gets removed with a screwdriver and you can check your batteries. Okay, next we're going to show you how to clean out the in-cabin air filter. It's located right behind this panel. To open this panel, we'll have to remove these 3 screws right here, which takes a T25 Torx. Okay, I've got these 3 screws out. I'm going to remove this panel. Now I need to remove all of these silver screws right here, which is a T20 Torx. Got the last screw out. I'm going to pop this cover off, set that to the side. And right here is my air filter. You notice an arrow on the filter pointing going into the cab. That's the way you want to put it. You pull this out. You have a clean side and a dirty side. You could blow this off, or if you're in an area that has a parts store or your local like AutoZone or Napa, you can buy these for pretty cheap out on the road. And this will really improve the air quality inside the rig while you're on a strike team. We'll start off in cab by checking our regular instrument gauges. This is a Freightliner, and the regular operating gauges are all right here in front of you. This is your air filter. If you press it, it'll check if your main air filter is clogged. Right next to it is the exhaust brake. It's got a very small label. It's kind of hard to see. It's dimly lit, has a small green light. That would turn your exhaust brake on and off, which is the only auxiliary braking system this has. There's 2 ways to put this in high idle. First is this red switch. You'll flick up on the red switch. Or on this side on the left, you use your cruise control. You'll hit speed control, lift up on the accelerate, and you can finally tune your high idle to where you want it. This is your Allison transmission control box here. If you hit mode and hit both arrows at the same time, that'll check your fluid level for your transmission, and it'll tell you if you're high or low or good. And if you select up and down while you're driving, those gears will stay in that particular gear if you're getting ready to maybe do a downhill descent and you want to save your brakes and use your transmission. These 4 switches right here are for your windows. The newer brush rigs have standard old school roll up and down windows. We were having issues with these. That switch we covered under the cab, the circuit breaker, also controls these, and there's a fuse in the fuse box that goes out quite often on these. We have spare fuses for that. Hazard controls right up here for doing your hazard lights. And we'll move over here and talk about how to turn on your lights, sirens, and your light bar. This cluster right here, you can switch your air horn from electric to air. This is your emergency master. You flick that up. As long as all these are on, that's all your emergency code lights. Right here is your regen light. This will only let you go in regen if it's asking for it, and you'll see a light on your main cluster that's asking for it to go into regen. The instructions are right underneath the visor. You're just gonna flip the switch and it'll inhibit the regen. If you flick the switch down, it's got a little circle with a line through it. That'll keep the motor from going into regen. You might be on a long pumping operation or something, and that'll kind of override the regen system for you. We have a fuel primer, not necessarily, we won't use that. Our 4-wheel drive is right here. You have an all-wheel drive switch and a locked switch. If you hit the lock switch, that goes into 4-wheel drive high. And to put in 4-wheel drive high, you need to be stopped in neutral with the brake on. And to switch into low, you need to be in the 4-wheel high, then you hit the low range switch. That'll switch you in the low range. The max speed for driving in low range for this vehicle is 15 miles an hour, and the max speed for driving in high range is 20 miles an hour. This here is an inclinometer. This tells you your side angle. Say you're on a dozer line or a dirt road that's kind of a little iffy. This kind of gives you all your degrees. You definitely want to stay in the white numbers, and this gives you your incline and decline of the apparatus if maybe you're going up a steep road. Just gives you a good idea of what the road's like. All your normal air conditioning controls are down here, and there's actually a seat belt light, little panel just below that shows you who's buckled up or not. Okay, up high, you have your regular siren box like we have in all the our normal fire apparatus. And these switches basically control all of your scene lighting. These 2 on the left are your really large light bar on your roof for your front, and this one's for below the bumper. It gives you quite a bit of light at night. It's a pretty nice feature. And these are all your different scene lights around the side and the rear, and your ground lights and garage door openers. And that pretty much covers all the lighting for the apparatus on the exterior. Okay, so we're gonna go over some features right here in the center console. I'll start in this corner. We have our label with our height and weight. We have our water level, and we have a primer, and we have our foam system. We can turn the foam on and off here, but we cannot adjust the percentage. This is the PTO shifter. This is our main pump. Click it back, pump turns on. You'll see it says the lights will turn on for PTO engaged, okay to pump, and okay to pump and roll. You can mobile pump with this, however, it's a little more difficult. The higher RPM you go, the more pressure you're going to get. It's going to be a lot of work for the firefighters on the hose line. We prefer that you pump and roll off the auxiliary pump. Speaking of that, this is your auxiliary pump controls, very similar to out there. You have your on and off switch. You press that to turn it on. You can adjust high and low, and here's your primer. This is your pressure. This controls your spotlight along with that, similar to the ones on the newer engines. And you have your modem switch and your radio controls, and that pretty much wraps it up for your center console. Okay, I just want to talk about your transmission. Your overheating alarm will go off right around 275 degrees, and these are a couple steps you can take to mitigate that. Pull over, put the transmission in neutral. You want to run it between 1200 and 1500 RPM, and hopefully that cools it down. You also need to check the engine temperature. Okay, if you find yourself with your engine overheating, in this case you're really about over 230 degrees on your water temperature gauge. A couple things you can do is pull over, inspect your coolant level, make sure that the cap is on tight. Look at your fan shroud, check it for any debris, make sure that's functioning. The serpentine belt, make sure that's tight and still there. Check all your belts, hoses, and clamps. And lastly, check your exhaust and make sure your exhaust isn't bent and that's operating correctly. Okay, I'm going to talk about the winches that come in these brush apparatus. This is a Warren winch. It's rated at 15,000 pounds. These winches are not rated or designed for pulling out other apparatus. They are here for us to pull, maybe move a rock or a down tree, something that impedes our access or egress. A couple things with the winches, you always pull in a straight line, never around a turn. You want to maintain minimum 5 wraps. The more cable you have on the spool, the more pulling power this will have. When you do pull something, put a jacket or something over the cable just in case it breaks. It'll absorb the cable from coming back. And when you put it away, make sure you wind it up nicely and inspect it for any frayed wires or dents or anything in the cable. Okay, we're on top of the rig right now looking at the auxiliary pump engine. It's a Kubota 24 horsepower 3-cylinder diesel engine. There's the radiator right there. You can check the radiator fluid by popping that cap when it's cool. This is your air filter, 2 little spring hinges right here that come off to check that. And on the very back side right there, just poking out, is the dipstick, checking the oil. It's kind of difficult to find, but it's there. Check the oil in that. And there's also a fuel shutoff that's directly plumbed into our diesel tank for it. This is your auxiliary pump right here. And that's about it. Overall, you just want to check your cleanliness, make sure the fan's in good condition and everything looks like it's operating good.